And welcome to Riverside Episcopal Church. Our podcast each and every week is where faith, community, and everyday life intertwine. We believe in being guided by God's Word and embracing every heart. You're invited to join us each and every Sunday at 10 a.m., and you can find more about us at riversidemcalla.org. Let's dive into God's Word this week with Reverend Geoff Evans.
Well, good morning again, friends. I'm so excited to take part in our Summer Old Testament series. Remember, it's a bummer that a lot of these Old Testament stories are being lost. So inside the church and outside the church. So we're doing our little bit, and we're focusing on some classic figures, some classic characters, some classic stories from the Old Testament that everybody should know. Clark started us off great with that moment when Elijah there's the voice of God in the silence, right? And I think I'll never forget that image that he shared with us when you're meeting with a grieving family and there's silence in the conversation. That's actually the voice of God. And Tanya did a beautiful job last week talking about the transition from Elijah to Elisha and the throwing down of the mantle and the whirlwind from heaven. And I think I will always remember at this point, Elisha has, quote, main character energy. I'm folding that into my repertoire. Good artists borrow, great artists steal. So we're going a little bit further in the story this Sunday, and we're talking about the really captivating story of Naaman, the leprotic Syrian general. And I want to point out there's another character in the story that is near and dear to our hearts, which is the river. One of the great things about Riverside has been just this continual reminder of this rich biblical theme, which shows up in almost every book of the Bible, about the metaphor of the river for God's presence in the world. Like once you have eyes for it, you see it. And like I said, in almost every book of the Bible, it's become a very important metaphor for me, a way of thinking about God's presence. I grew up fishing with my granddad on the Tennessee River, and then not super successfully, but sailing on the Tennessee River and Lake Wheeler with my dad. We were not the most accomplished sailors. The mast fell down one time, but we made it back. And that river is still very important to me. And even now when we're just driving on 65 and you cross the river, I'm always just kind of gobsmacked at how big the thing is. It's a big river. And then I'm really moved to think about all the little creeks and streams and tributaries that go from miles and miles that make up that river, all that water which finds its way kind of miraculously into that big body of water. And I'm reminded that that's why God chooses the river as an image for his presence, because all of the pain and all the suffering and all the tragedy that we have gets collected and finds its way with everybody else's suffering and everybody else's pain into one body. And God cuts away through hard rock by the presence of water and works a healing with all this pain, with all this suffering. It all comes to one place. It ends up at the river, which is why God, I think, uses that metaphor so profitably. I was really excited. This past week, I got an email from a very nice person who visited us one time when we were in the cafeteria, and she said that she wanted to come back, that she was hoping to come back. And in a fit of what I hope is not pretentiousness, but is inspiration, I signed off my email saying, "See you at the river."
Oh, yeah.
It made my week.
Oh, yeah.
It made my week. And she sent out a nice response, and I think she got it too. But that's what I want to tag my time with y'all today by saying this. God looks at the pain and suffering of this world, pain among individuals, pain among nations, war, conflict, disease, destruction, and says, "See you at the river, where I intend to heal every bit of it, where I intend to put it all right." God says, "See you at the river," and we do. Okay, so we are in the book of 2 Kings, and it's really important to me that we're developing our biblical literacy, and so we need to do a little bit of just basics about where in this Bible that we are. So the Old Testament is divided up into chunks. The first bit is the Torah, or the Pentateuch, Penta for first 5 books, the first 5 books of Moses. And then come the history books. And these is, like, if you want to start somewhere in the Bible, start in the history books, because there's some wild, crazy, captivating things, right? These are the books of 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, or so on. And this is kind of the history. This is the story of the people of Israel and eventually of its divided kingdom. And then you move into the wisdom literature. The wisdom literature is the Psalms and the Proverbs and the kind of poetry of the Old Testament. We read from the wisdom literature every Sunday. We just did Psalm 30. And then you move into what we call the major prophets. Major because they're the biggest works that you have there. So Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel. Those are the major prophets. And then you have the minor prophets. Not less important, but a smaller literary legacy, which is why we call them the minor prophets. These are people like Hosea, Micah, Amos. Jennifer's going to preach on Amos next Sunday. All this is knit together. But the part of 2 Kings that we are in is telling the story of what most scholars think is the 9th century BC. Let's let that sink in for a minute. You and I got in our cars on a holiday weekend. We came to learn about a story that's 3,000 years old. Isn't that pretty cool? This story is still being studied. We're still learning about it. We're still delving into a 3,000-year-old story. Now stick with me on this because we got to get a little even more nerdy. There's an important subtext that's going on here. And there are a few dates in the Bible worth memorizing, and this is one of them. In 586 BC, the Empire of Babylon conquered Jerusalem. They took the king captive and they knocked down the Temple of Solomon. And they forced many of the Israelites back to Babylon to live as slaves. This was a political catastrophe. This was a social and cultural catastrophe. But it was also a theological catastrophe. Because what happened then is the rabbis and the scribes and the religious thinkers of the time realized there is a chance that all of this is going to go away. There's a chance that 100 or 200 years from now, no one will remember the Jews or the story of our God. And so we have got to put pen to paper on these largely oral stories. And the history that you're reading today was most likely composed by rabbis, some of them in exile, after the Babylonian conquest of 586. It's telling a 9th century story, but it's written in the 6th century. Now, why is that important? Think about what a terrible thing the Babylonian conquest was, and yet it caused a set of circumstances that result in the Bible. If that hadn't happened, you wouldn't have the Bible that you have today. It simply wouldn't exist. And also, in these grisly, kind of gnarly, violent stories, it helps to remember that most of them are being written down from the vantage point of oppressed, enslaved, and conquered people. It's very important to remember that. I'm going to refer to that a little bit later on. Okay, enough history or textual history, everybody's favorite form of history. Let's dig into the story itself. So, Naaman is a great general of Syria, and Syria and Israel are ancient and arch foes. They're like Sunni and Shia in the Arabian Peninsula, and they're like Catholic and Protestant in Northern Ireland. They've been at loggerheads for thousands and thousands of years. They've fought many wars against one another, and they have lingering animosity to this very day and to this very moment. Right? The land right above the Dead Sea as you go north is contested land between Israel and Syria to this very, very moment. So in a big sense, it's still happening. Sometimes Israel was up and Syria down, sometimes Syria up and sometimes Israel down, like Alabama and Auburn, I guess, in that sense. But this is a moment where Syria is up. And Naaman has been a great victor in the many wars against Syria, fighting for his king, the great King Ben-Hadad II of Syria. But he's got a problem. He's a leper. Now, leprosy in the Bible does not mean what we now call Hansen's disease. It is a catch-all term for any number of like gnarly skin conditions, incurable, gnarly skin conditions. And this is a big deal in Naaman's life because not only is it painful and difficult, but it would connote in the ancient mind a kind of judgment upon something he or his ancestors had done. So there was a deep sense of shame attached to it. So it's a shame that kind of hung around his household. So a member of his household, an Israelite slave girl, suggests to Naaman's wife that there's a holy man in the north of Israel that could actually heal him of his disease. A lot of interesting stuff going on here. First of all, my heart breaks for this Israelite slave girl living in Syria away from her home. I'm reminded of all the horrible things that are done to children and to women when it comes to bloodshed and violence on the earth. And it's impossible for me to think about her without thinking about the horrible treatment of Yazidi women and girls that happened in northern Iraq and southern Syria over the last 2 or 3 years. It's impossible to not think about them in the context of her treatment. And yet, 3,000 years ago, she was lucky to escape the conquering of her town, lucky to escape her captivity. And the fact that she has a place and even a voice in Naaman's household seems to indicate some kind of ancient decency, if that makes sense. It would seem to indicate a higher level of decency than you might find in other warlords or great people of the time. But also, we got to really celebrate her and her character, because what she says is risky. It's really risky. Slaves don't tell generals what to do now or in the ancient world. And also, there were all kind of healers in Syria. And so what she's saying is there's a healer where I'm from that can actually do you some good. Right? That could be interpreted as a statement of national pride, which is a dangerous thing to do if you're a slave. This is chutzpah of the first degree. And Naaman listens to her. He packs up everything he has and he goes. Now this is cool because, friends, God can do amazing things with very little things that we say, right? God can use a little thing that you say in faith to lead or prod or encourage somebody along the way, and God can change their life and change the life of the whole world. Like a little bit of chutzpah combined with faith can change massive things in our lives. It's a lesson we should take from this. Anyway, so Naaman and his entourage, chariots and wealth, he's carrying about $100,000 worth of goods in today's money. And he takes it all down, and you got to meet with the king first, and he meets with the king, and he asks the king to heal him, and the king freaks out. The king thinks it's a trap. Here is Syria again, these no good Syrians. We've got some butter side up, butter side down stuff going on here. Here are these no good Syrians trying to trick me. They know I can't heal anybody, so he rends his garments and he freaks out. Now this is cool. Elisha, fully in his main character energy at this point, gets word that Naaman has come and that the king freaked out. And Elijah sends word to the king and says, "Get your act together and send that man to me," which is what the king does. So Elijah takes all his military might, his entourage, his chariots, his wealth, his power, his prestige. He takes all that to Elijah's front door. And at Elijah's front door, what Naaman expected is to be treated as a big man. "Naaman, come into my living room. Let me show you some food. Sit down, rest, let me water your horses." That was normal interaction in the ancient world, and still is in a lot of parts of the Middle East. That's not what he gets. Elijah doesn't get up out of his chair, doesn't come outside. He sends a messenger that says, the prophet says, "Go bathe in the river Jordan 7 times. Naaman is furious. He's furious. He's just been snubbed by the prophet of an inferior enemy. He hasn't been treated like a great man. He's been treated like a beggar, like somebody just seeking a blessing, and he's enraged. And I love that funny thing that he says, "Are not the rivers of Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, my hometown, superior to this muddy ditch you call the Jordan?" In fairness to Naaman, when him and I went to the Holy Land, and when we beheld the fabled, in my mind, the iconic, just amazing, I expected it to be glittering with sort of just mystique. I expected John the Baptist to just stroll up and speak to me. When I looked at the River Jordan, I thought to myself, there's not much of a river. It's a creek where I come from. So I can see where Naaman's coming from. But then I want you to notice one of the servants says to Naaman, if the prophet had asked you to do something really hard, you probably would have done it, right? He's asking you to do something easy. So why not do that? Second time a servant has shared the gospel with Naaman. Second time a powerless character has told the powerful to get his act together. And Naaman listens. And he dips himself into the water, that muddy water 7 times, and he comes up and his skin is like the skin of a child. He's healed. There's a bunch of cool bits of the story that we didn't have time for. In fact, we don't have time for it, but go home and read the second half of 2 Kings 5. It's the second half of a really ripping yarn. But I want to point out at this point that more has been healed in Naaman than merely his skin. He has had to lay down his power, his prestige, his sense of himself. He has had to lay down who he is and why he thinks he's special in order for God to heal him. It's just like U2 said. Love is not an easy thing. The only baggage you can bring is all that you can't leave behind. The same is true for you and me, beloved. One of the great impediments to healing in our lives is pride. Pride has to be laid down in order for God to work powerfully. That's exactly what God does with us. I also want to point out, too, a thing that I don't like about the story, a thing that bothers me, which is that, man, I wish the Israelite slave girl would get freed and then return to her home. That'd be a better ending in my 21st century mindset. And yet, something very interesting is afoot here. She doesn't get returned home, and yet in the way she is the voice of God in the story. In fact, she's the one that understands better than any other characters who understand. Think about the people who wrote this story down in the 6th century who were themselves slaves in a foreign land. They didn't get freed for generations and generations, and yet they saw in her what it meant to be faithful without power, what it meant to trust in God against all circumstances. They saw in her what it meant to be the epitome of a Jewish and faithful person. And her example gave them strength for the living of their lives. Something else I want to point out too, which is that the river of healing runs through our lives. And in fact, our whole church is dedicated to this. All of us are Naaman in a very real sense. All of us have been called to lay down pride in order to get healing. Y'all, this just has hit me like a ton of bricks over the last few months, what God has done with us in our 15 months of life. I have watched this congregation literally heal. It's astounding. Multiple people have come up to me and said, I've gotten hearing aids. And I still find your preaching palatable. We've gotten hips replaced. People have pushed into sobriety. People have gotten fit, worked on their health, worked on their heart condition. People have really tried to change the sort of details of their lives, and me included. I've had to lay down a lot of pride too. And I've just been so astounded that, like, man, I'm such a Jesus freak and I'm a church nerd. I talk about this stuff all the time, but it actually works. Turning to God and worshiping God and being part of God's community actually does heal people. It's healing all of us right here. Some of us are learning to walk again. We're the church of the cane. We're also the church of the thrown down cane. Literally and figuratively. Y'all, this is really happening to us here at the river. What Jesus does in our life is what Jesus does for Naaman and what Jesus is doing for all of us. When Jesus says to the woman at the well in Samaria, the water that I give you will never leave you thirsty. He is that living water, and he's the one we meet when we come to the river. So, beloved, the invitation to you and me and the invitation to this whole world is to take our grief, take our sorrow, take our shame, and trust that God is saying, I want you to bring all that when I see you at the river. Thanks be to God.
We are a community of believers striving to live out our faith into the world, and this inspiring message, a part of each and every Sunday. You're invited to join us, and to find out more, easy to do. Just go to riversidemccullough.org.